This Steve Austin Bret Hart shoot interview. It was more like old friends talking. You can tell that they really like each other, and you can tell that Steve Austin has a lot of respect for Bret Hart, and you can tell that they liked working together. It's not like a grilling session. There's no really hard hitting questions in it, but it's nice to see and enjoyable to watch. Mike Piper's right beside me right now. I'm actually there she is. Wake her up just for you. I don't think she's quite sleeping. She was bossing me around earlier, but here she is. Mwah. See, you made me wake her up. But the fans like to see her. So there she is. But anyways, I digressed. What they talking about in this to start off doesn't really go into the full history of Bret Hart. It talks a lot about the time of the feud between Steve Austin and Bret Hart. And the show, it actually starts, they start pretty quick off the beginning talking about the Shawn Michaels Survivor Series match against Bret Hart, and why he didn't like Shawn Michaels was because apparently Bret Hart had heard that they were going to work, and Bret had said that he was cool and he'll do the honors if necessary. And according to Bret, Shawn responded that he wouldn't do the same thing for him. There's rumors, of course, that they were both fucking Sonny at this time too. So take that for what you want. That would have added to their heat. That wasn't brought up in this, but Sonny has talked about fucking Shawn Michaels, and Shawn Michaels, I heard firsthand in an interview, say that the reason he brought up Bret Hart's Sunny Days thing was because he had heard Bret Hart was having sex with Sonny. So was this whole heat, did that have a lot to do with their heat? Who knows? But anyways, Bret Hart goes on to talk about the screw job thing that we've heard his version of it a bunch of times. He also talks about Vince McMahon helping him get a better deal with WCW, and that he had creative control in his contract the last 60 days. Pretty much the same that we've always heard. I still don't know. I used to be more of a full believer in it, but considering like this whole interview is a WWE production, and he had a wire on him, which I don't think you can legally tape people and play it on documentaries. And he ended up making a lot of money back with WWE after the whole WCW thing. I don't know. All I know is that Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, and Vince McMahon are three of the greatest workers. So I take the whole Survivor Series thing with a grain of salt these days. They talked about Owen Hart's. They didn't go into great detail actually about the Owen Hart fall thing. Again, this was now the second time in in the Jeff Jarrett Broken Skull Sessions podcast. Steve Austin talks about Owen Hart positively, and he talks about Owen Hart positively with Bret Hart too. So it's nice that he seems to have let the net breaking thing go, which was an accident. But as I said, I used to listen to his podcast, and it was something that was regularly brought up many times. And actually, when at one point I talked on the phone to Steve Austin, and I think he also brought that up too, talking about his wrestling career being ended early due to that neck break. But obviously, he's gone on to be a big movie star. He's got a TV show coming out on A&E. He's still working with WWE. He's been very successful, and thank God that didn't end up worse. Accidents happen. Again, one thing I don't understand in this, Steve Austin admits in this that he's accidentally hurt people. Bret Hart again is saying that he never hurt anyone, even though, according to many people, Dynamite, including Jake the Snake Roberts, in one of these shoot interviews, saying Dynamite Kid was hurt several times by Bret in the Stampede Wrestling days, and Jinder Mahal, who was very close with Bad News, and Bad News Brown helped train him. And by the way, Bret up bashes Bad News and stuff in his book, which I understand the reasons why they may have heat or whatever. But Bad News always said that Bret Hart hurt him multiple times. So maybe if Bret Hart just keeps telling, if you say something enough, people will just never question it. If you just keep saying you've never hurt anyone, go ahead. But there's people on the record saying that you've heard Bad News and Dynamite. And accidents happen in wrestling. It's a rough sport. I've been hurt in wrestling by accidents. I mean, and I've hurt people by accident. Luckily, it hasn't happened that many times, thank God, because it's professional wrestling, and that's not supposed to happen. They talk about WCW. I'd never heard this before. Bret Hart talks about WCW multiple times, flew him to towns and didn't use him, and he was mad about that. But in reality, if you're making millions of dollars a year, and Bret Hart brings up in this, he had 5-star hotel, first class flight, and everything. I mean, you could look at it and get angry, or you could just say, okay, I'm going to take this as a vacation. I'm going to go to this town, live it up, the 5-star hotel. I don't have to do anything, and look at the positive side of it. How many people even get to fly first class ever in their lives? But yeah, he mentions that WCW dropped the ball. They talk about the Canadian Stampede. Austin brings up that was one of his favorite matches of all time. And when they showed the clips from the Canadian Stampede, it made me think, yeah, WCW really dropped the ball never going to Calgary, because they would have had such a crazy hot crowd in Calgary. It would have been amazing. They also go over, by the way, the WrestleMania 13 match, where they don't even try to keep kayfabe. Nobody does anymore. But there's one point in the match where he hits Steve Austin with the bell, and Bret even says, "I didn't even touch you with that. I missed you by that much." So it's just like, as much as that stuff's interesting, in a way it's sad that, like, there's literally no more magic in wrestling. The magicians give away their secrets. Jason, yeah, Piper's doing a lot better, thank God. She's tough. Other than that, Bret Hart has a beer. This actually, they don't have Steve's beer in Canada for whatever reason, but I've seen enough of these. It's a great advertisement for his beer, because it makes me want to know what the hell the beer tastes like, because I've seen it. I started watching the Randy Orton episode too, and Randy also drinks the beer in it too. So it's a good promotion for his beer company. Yeah, it's two buddies talking. It was interesting, and Steve's a fan of Bret. I was never a fan of Bret. I have to admit, I never was a fan of Bret Hart. I hate to say that. I was always an Undertaker fan during that low period of WWE. And then prior to that, it was Macho Man and Ric Flair. Bret Hart, I never disliked him as a wrestler. But yeah. I never was excited about watching his matches. And I can tell you from the house shows around that time that I saw Bret Hart on, oftentimes they weren't that great. His match in Ottawa against Ric Flair drew well, which I think was in November of '92. But they had other matches in Hull, Quebec when he was champion. Bret against Jim Neidhart that may have drawn 1,000 people. Which, by the way, when WWE's business was bad, they stopped going to the big arena in Ottawa and they went to the small arena in Hull, Quebec, just across the river there. And that was when Bret was champion, actually. But he did have a cage match against Diesel in Hull after they hadn't even come to Ottawa for like a year and a half, or Hull, because I guess the crowds weren't big enough. That I remember when they came back with like Diesel and Bret Hart in a cage, that match drew well. But yeah, no, it's worth watching. I enjoyed it. The other thing was Bret Hart never really he did go after one person. He went after Goldberg, or he went after two people. He said he hated working with Vader. Vader was beating the shit out of him and hurting him. And by the way, Vader, if you watch my interview with Vader, he didn't like Bret Hart either. And he goes off about Goldberg again, hurting everybody. But I have heard that he actually wrestled Goldberg after that concussion incident and wrestled 10 more times after that concussion incident. So I don't know, take that for what it's worth. Wallace says various things happen when events are done on location. Wrestlers can sustain serious injuries. Yes, it's a rough and dangerous sport. I talked yesterday about all the concussions I've had and stitches. I get cut open easily. I've had lots of hard ways and also planned ones. I guess you could say I am a bleeder in that manner. But I guess the most serious injury I ever had from wrestling was getting cut with the hepatitis C infected razor blade from Abdullah the Butcher, but that was an intentional thing. It wasn't an accident. That's the most serious injury I've had, other than sprains and back pain here and there and knee pain here and there. Someone liked Bret because he was more technical. Yes, Vader was stiff for sure, but honestly, I really like watching Vader. I understand Bret has his fans, and yeah, good. I understand. He's a good guy to have on the card, but for the style of wrestling I like, I'd rather watch Vader. And yes, Steve respects Bret quite a bit. I respect Steve a lot. He's one of my favorite wrestlers, and as I said, I think he's the most popular interviewer for sure, because he's on the WWE network and he's the most popular interview show on the network. So I'll take the title for myself on YouTube, because I have the highest viewed overall wrestling interviews on YouTube, and he's not on YouTube. So I enjoy watching him. I'm a fan of shoot interviews. I've been watching shoot interviews since like 2001 and reading wrestling books since they started being written. And I've been a wrestling fan all my life, wrestling promoter since 2004, I think. I promoted my first show, Stampede Wrestling. Then I moved on to promoting Great North Wrestling, and I've been a wrestler. So for the people that wonder what my qualifications are, there you go. Have a great night.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe